My son left me on a foreign street, with no wallet, no phone, no passport, and he didn't even look back. I remember the way the taxi's taillights smeared into the humid night like a red apology. And I remember standing there, 68 years old, feeling smaller than the duffel bag slumped at my feet. If you're listening to this right now, check if you're subscribed, because you should hear what comes next. The street smelled of frying oil and motor exhaust. Neon signs buzzed. People moved with the kind of indifferent choreography you only see in cities, where everyone is in a hurry to be somewhere else. I had come so far for one night, thinking a weekend might fix a lifetime of small silences, the missed calls, the polite lies, the way Evan would smooth his hair like he was preparing to perform a life I couldn't follow. He'd said it was a reconciliation trip, something to mark the anniversary of my wife's death. "Let's try, Dad, just a weekend," he'd said, from the other side of the world, his voice quick and strangely careful. I believed him. Now I believe less easily. I felt the fabric of the duffel under my fingers, the seams that had carried my work boots for decades, the sweat darkening the cotton where I had gripped it all day. My hands shook, not with age alone, but with the shock that your own child can become a door that slams. When I checked my pockets and found them empty, the air left the world. No wallet, no house keys, no phone, no passport. A small, savage arithmetic. Without those pieces of paper, you are nothing on foreign soil. You vanish into the bureaucracy. I tried to tell myself there was some mistake. Maybe Evan would come back, sheepish and embarrassed, laughing at himself. Maybe he'd been angry and left to cool off. I walked to the edge of a market and stared at faces. Because strangers look like a promise. They might be a friend. They might be a threat. But they are something. My English worked in small, polite transactions. 2 bottles of water, directions, a taxi driver who wanted to charge me twice the meter rate because I was foreign. The airport was miles away, and I had no money for a cab. The man who found me sat on the bench beside me without asking if I was all right. He was older than me, maybe in his 80s. But his clothes were the kind you see in movies about people who had once meant business. A thin cane, with a silver handle rested between his knees. He smelled faintly of cologne and old paper. His name was Arun. He glanced at me once, like a man who had noticed a bird with a broken wing. He did not look away when I told him what had happened. He did not offer pity. Instead, he gave me a flat observation, the kind that might have been rehearsed over many similar encounters. "You will not be safe out here at night. Come with me, Belt." I should have refused. I should have refused for reasons both rational and suspicious. But when an older man offers you refuge, and a sentence that steadies the reeling part of your mind, you accept. He took me to a car with tinted windows and drove me away from the chaotic lights. The car hummed like it was swallowing all the noise. We did not speak much. He told me that his son had died, that the house was quiet, that he had guests expected for dinner, relatives, a lawyer, a caretaker. His voice was steady, not theatrical. He asked me nothing about myself beyond my name. He asked only that I play along. "Pretend to be my son," he said softly. "For tonight." The sentence was absurd. Pretend, play, act. Pretendations felt fragile to me then, but so did every other plan I had left. Behind his eyes there was a gravity that pulled at something in my chest, an invitation and an experiment at once. He spoke of a will, of family who came sniffing at the edges when a man's life drew close to an end. He spoke of tests to see who loved him for what he was, and who loved him for what he had. I had been abandoned by my own blood at an airport. Here, offered a place at a table and a coat and a bed. I found my refusal made small. The house he took me to was not like the modest bungalows I used to repair with my crew. It was older, built of brick and timber, with windows so tall they looked like watchful eyes. The driveway curled under oaks that held the last of autumn's leaves like medals. Inside, the room smelled of polished wood and lemon oil. The staff moved quietly. There was a domestic choreography that suggested money, yes, but also A practiced solitude. The man who introduced me as his son, that was the role I held at the doorway, welcomed me into a world that had not expected to need me. Dinner was a formal affair, the table laid out as if for a photograph. There was a woman named Margaret who ran the household, and registered surprise like an automatic reflex when a new son materialized. There was a lawyer in a dark suit, who asked pointed, practiced questions about my childhood that I answered plainly: construction work. A small apartment back in Phoenix. A wife who had died 12 years ago. There was a younger man, Niran, who smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. He moved to record the conversation on a device I could not see. His phone like a small, accusing witness. The story slipped into something else over bread and soup. Arun, the man who had taken me in, admitted in a voice the color of old wood that his son had died years ago. He wanted to know what it felt like to have a son again. He wanted, in the end, to see who would treat him kindly, without counting the cost. People come into my life, wanting my name, he said. They come for stories to tell at parties. They come for signatures. I want to know, Henry, which of these people will stay when the signatures are gone? If you rudder was, as the night peeled away its polite surface, pieces fell into place in my head like bricks settling into mortar. There had been hints with Evan over the last year. A call he returned late. A voice less warm when I talked about my small life. He had introduced me to his colleagues once, and called me David. A softer name, like something to be shielded or hidden. Those were small things then. Now they felt like the seams of a larger unraveling. I could hear how my own narrative of being proud and firm had shifted into something Evan wanted to distance himself from. His embarrassment at the world I embodied was like a quiet theft that grew until the morning he left me. That night I slept in a guest room that had more pillows than I owned dishes. The bed smelled of lavender and something expensive. For the first time in months, I slept without the ache that had become part of waking. Yet sleep gave me no absolution. In the quiet, after the house exhaled into midnight, I went through the motions of a man who had nothing to lose. I searched drawers, not for valuables but for truths. I found a photograph of a young man with an artist's defiant posture. Arun's son, James. He did not resemble me. He was not supposed to. But in the photograph, there was the looseness of someone who had chosen himself. And I recognized, with a piercing clarity, the thing I had feared about my own son. That choice could become a barrier. Morning came with coffee and the small conspiracies of routine. Arun asked me about my life, not as a test but as a conversation. And when I told him about Sarah, the woman I had loved and lost, his face changed the way a tide changes. He spoke of loss with a tenderness that undid him. We were two old men who had placed weight on young shoulders and then watched the shoulders turn away. "Don't make my mistake," he said quietly one afternoon. But his sentence was not a rebuke. It was a pleading as gentle as the fog that drifted through the garden. Yet the house had its shadows. Cameras watched corners. A tablet sat, like an accused thing on the coffee table. A device that held messages not meant for strangers. At times I felt the taut thread of performance vibrate under my skin: pretend son, pretend gratitude, pretend belonging. And at other times, I felt something raw and honest. Relief. That at least one person had looked at me and decided I was enough. Not because I could write a check, but because I could be present. Even as I accepted dinner invitations and guided Arun gently through the step of introducing me to colleagues who wanted to test me, the image of Evan's taillights haunted me. I kept thinking about the small arithmetic of absence. You are abandoned, and someone finds you. You are humiliated, and someone else offers dignity. Those two truths sat together in my mind like strangers at a table that would not let them be comfortable. That afternoon, a tablet buzzed with an email that made my skin tighten. It read, plain and accusing, "He's not your son, and you know it." The message was not meant to console. It was meant to unsettle. I showed it to Arun. He smiled the way people smile when they are both sad and satisfied with their plan. "Let them watch," he said. "Let them show their faces." I understood, in that instant, that I had stepped into something larger than me. The offer to pretend had been a doorway. What lay beyond was not merely dinner and a bed, it was a reckoning. Mini-hook. Someone in the house is recording everything. And when the cameras reveal a theft that will change everything, I will have to decide, do I stay and help expose the truth, or do I walk away to a life that might be quieter, but lonelier still? The morning after that uneasy dinner, the house felt different. Not louder, not busier, just watchful. There's a certain silence money creates. A silence that carries expectation. When I walked down the hallway, I felt it pressing against my shoulders, the same way I used to feel drywall leaning before it collapsed. Something was shifting inside those walls. And inside me. Nurse Molly found me first. She moved with the soft confidence of someone who knew which truths to speak and which to hold. She placed a cup of ginger tea in my hands and whispered, "Be careful today. People saw you last night. They will try to figure out what you are. Do it." I didn't know what I was: guest, witness, decoy. Maybe a mirror to someone's greed. But the way she said it, it was as if she'd watched men walk into storms like this before. She guided me to a sunlit corner of the sitting room and closed the door gently behind her. Then she reached into her jacket and placed a small black USB in my palm. "If you want to understand this house, watch this. When you're alone, don't tell anyone. I gave it to you. 1 PS." Before I could ask why, she was gone. I pocketed the USB like it was a confession. And in a way, it was. Arun called me into his study shortly after. He was reviewing papers, his hands trembling slightly. The way age trembles when determination forces it to stay still. "Henry, sit. There are things I need you to know before the others arrive today." 2. I sat across from him, sunlight warming the wooden desk between us. There were medical documents scattered in careful disorder, as if he'd been reading them over and over. The words, "cardiac deterioration" and "specialist report" flashed in my mind before he nudged them aside. "You are wondering why I brought you here," he said. I nodded. "Because a dying man cannot afford to misjudge character. And I saw something in you that night on the street. Something steady. Something unbought. 170'd. I tried to swallow the knot in my throat. "And what exactly do you need from me?" Izot. "Not a performance," he said. "A witness." Veals. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Hard, confident, territorial. Niran walked in without knocking. "Uncle, the attorney wants to finalize tomorrow's meeting, and we need to discuss the ledger," the appraiser said. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes hardened. "You're still here?" Two-way. Arun's tone cut the room clean. "Henry is my guest." 18. The younger man's jaw twitched. "A guest? Who's being introduced as your son?" End quote. I held his stare. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't retreat. That seemed to irritate him more than anything. When he left, slamming the door with more force than necessary, Arun leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. He has been circling this house like a hawk. All of them have. The minute my heart began to fail, the visitors multiplied. That was the first time he admitted openly that he was sick. It wasn't spoken with fear. It was spoken like a fact he'd made peace with, but didn't trust the people around him to respect. Later that afternoon, when the house settled into its soft midday quiet, I finally plugged the USB into the laptop in my room. The screen flickered, and grainy footage appeared: hallway cameras, time-stamped late nights and early mornings. I watched Niran enter Arun's office, while the old man slept upstairs. He rifled through drawers with the speed of someone who'd done it before, who knew exactly which lockboxes were new and which were old. Then he found a small safe behind a painting, punched in a code with practiced confidence, and pulled out a thin, red ledger. I froze. This wasn't curiosity. It was intention. Each page he photographed with careful precision. Each glance over his shoulder grew sharper, colder. Then he closed everything, placed the ledger back, adjusted the painting, and walked out. The video ended. I sat there in the dim light, hearing my own breath push the air in and out of my chest. I had experienced betrayal from the closest blood possible. A son I raised with calloused hands and late-night stories. But what I watched on that screen was betrayal of a different kind. Colder, seasoned, sharpened over time. When I went downstairs, Margaret, the housekeeper, was arranging fresh flowers on the dining table. She looked up at me with a tight smile. "Be careful today," she murmured. "Whenever there's a family meeting coming, the walls get thin." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. But the day wasn't finished with me yet. Near sunset, while Arun rested in his favorite chair, his tablet lit up with another message. The sender was anonymous, but the tone was familiar. "Don't trust him. He's after the house." He was where? At first I thought it was about me. I felt a tired, hollow ache. A man abandoned by his own son does not easily accept slander from strangers. But when Arun read the message, he didn't look at me. He looked toward the hallway where Niran had disappeared. "That house," he whispered, "is the reason they come. Not for dinner. Not for memories. For walls and land and locked cabinets." He's nufted. I sat beside him. "Why show me all this? I'm a stranger to you." "Why? You are the only person in this house who has nothing to gain," he said. "That is what makes you dangerous to them." 18. A knock broke the quiet. It was Molly again. Her eyes darted between us. Fear coiled behind her calm face. "He's here," she whispered. "Who?" I asked. She stepped aside. The lawyer, Sudha, appeared in the doorway, holding a folder thick enough to change a life. "We need to talk," she said gently to Arun, "before tomorrow's reading." Instead, as she spoke, I felt something settle in me, the first weight of responsibility. What began as survival had turned into something else. I was no longer playing a part. I was standing in it. When Arun left with her, I stepped into the hallway, catching my reflection in the glass cabinet door. A tired face. A man pushed by life into roles he never auditioned for. A father who had been discarded and yet found, unexpectedly, needed. Then my temporary phone, the cheap one Arun gave me, buzzed. A number from the U.S. My chest tightened before I answered. "Dad, are you okay?" "It's not him." Evan's voice. "My son. The man who left me. The man who could unravel everything inside me with a single sentence." He sounded scared. He sounded human. He sounded like the past clawing its way back into my present. And as I listened to him breathe on the other end, the house around me seemed to hold its breath too, because whatever he said next would change the shape of the storm I was standing in. "Dad, please, say something." This Danster. Evan's voice trembled in a way I hadn't heard since he was a kid afraid of thunderstorms. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The betrayal at the airport was still a bruise I hadn't touched, and hearing his voice pressed a thumb right into it. "I'm alive," I finally said. "That's all I've got for you." "It's not ass." There was a shaky breath on his side. "Where are you?" "I've been calling your old number. I went to your apartment. You weren't there. I thought something happened." In 19 life. "Something did happen," I replied, pacing the hallway slowly. "You happened." Devil eyes. Silence. The heavy kind. "I know." His voice cracked. "Dad, what I did, it was wrong. I was scared. I wasn't thinking straight. And I won. Won. What I won. Vanessa's parents. Don't blame other people." I cut in. "You left me in a country I didn't know, with nothing. That wasn't pressure. That was a choice. I haven't aced." A muffled sound came through the line. Maybe he'd covered the phone. Maybe he was wiping his face. I didn't know anymore which version of him was real. "I'm trying to fix it," he whispered. "Just tell me you're safe." I looked down the long hallway of Arun's home. The polished wood, the paintings, the quiet wealth. Safe wasn't the word I'd use for anything in this place. "I'm somewhere I wasn't expecting to be," I said. "That's all." Hasnode. Before he could say more, footsteps echoed behind me. I turned to see Niran standing by the staircase, arms crossed, watching me with a narrowed gaze, the way a man watches a dog he's sure is going to bite. "I have to go," I said sharply, ending the call. Niran stepped closer. Family trouble, Henry? Well, I didn't answer. His smile grew crooked, like he enjoyed the silence. You know, he said softly, men who drift into other people's lives rarely drift out so easily. Wise. I stepped around him, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. But he followed one step behind. Like a shadow. That meant harm. Uncle Arun is old, he continued. Tired. Confused. And confused men make mistakes. Big ones. He meant the will. He meant the house. He meant the reason I was suddenly a threat. I'm just a guest, I said. For now. If with Prestons. His voice sharpened at the end, like a blade being tested. I walked into the courtyard and finally breathed. There was a narrow strip of shade under a tree, and I sat there until my heartbeat slowed enough to think. That was when Sudha, the attorney, joined me. She didn't sit. She stood quietly, hands clasped in front of her. I need to speak with you privately, she said. There was no fear in her tone, but there was something else. Caution. Maybe disappointment. Maybe duty. I stood. Is something wrong? To ask. She hesitated. I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Did Arun pay you to be here? W. No. In way. Did you approach him in public? It's guide. No. 100. Did he tell you to pretend to be his son? End quote. I took a breath. Not exactly. He asked me to stand beside him, because he didn't trust the people who should have loved him. And ashtrays. She studied me. Her eyes, sharp, behind her glasses. After a long moment, she nodded, as if confirming something she suspected. There are things you don't know, she said. This family. There have been disputes for years. Elders taken advantage of. Assets quietly moved. Care offered when money was involved. Then withdrawn when it wasn't. Mike answered. Is that what's happening now? Act. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she opened the folder in her hands and pulled out a page. Medical forms. Evaluations. Signatures of 3 independent physicians. Arun wanted to make sure his mind couldn't be questioned, she said. He requested these assessments himself. My. The pieces were falling together. Slowly. Cleanly. Terrifyingly. You think someone's trying to get him declared incompetent? I said. I don't think, she replied. I know. 8. Before I could ask anything else, a voice shouted from inside. It was Nurse Molly. We rushed through the archway and into the back corridor. She stood there, pale and frightened, pointing toward Arun's study. He's not waking up. Is no 10. We hurried inside. Arun was slumped in his chair, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Not gone. Not yet. But fragile like a man balanced on the thinnest wire. The doctor arrived within minutes. They checked his pulse, his pupils, his vitals. He needs rest, the doctor said. He's under stress. Too much conflict is not good for him. Quote, conflict. The word tasted bitter. As the doctor left, I noticed something on Arun's desk. A thick envelope with my name on it. I reached for it. But Sudha placed a hand gently over mine. Not yet, she said. If he prepared something, it's meant for after tomorrow. Tomorrow? Eyes, the will reading. End. The words struck something deep in me, something that rattled like a loose nail inside a wall. Niran appeared in the doorway again. Eyes flickering between me and the envelope. Funny, he said. I don't remember Uncle ever preparing letters for strangers. Efferwaya. He's resting, Sudha said firmly. Leave him be. But Niran didn't move. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe and whispered just loudly enough. Some people walk into wealth by accident, and some walk into prisons the same way. End quote. I stepped toward him, voice steady. What are you trying to say? With comp. He smirked. Just that tomorrow's meeting is going to be entertaining. Die plaid. He pushed off the doorframe and disappeared into the hall, humming as if he hadn't just threatened my freedom in the most elegant way possible. I stayed beside Arun until evening, listening to his quiet breaths, feeling the weight of choices I'd never expected to make. I didn't know which part frightened me more. The danger around him, or the danger around me. When night finally stretched across the house, I slipped out to the balcony for air. The city glowed below like a restless heart, and for the first time since arriving, I felt a strange pull, a sense that I wasn't just a guest here, I was part of the storm. And tomorrow, when the truth was finally dragged into a room full of sharpened eyes, I would have to stand in the center of it, whether I wanted to or not. The next morning arrived with the kind of stillness that makes you uneasy, a quiet, too controlled, too deliberate, like the house itself was holding its breath for what was coming. I woke early, long before the household staff began moving, long before the light warmed the floors. I had barely slept. The weight of the envelope with my name on it seemed to follow me, as if its sealed edges carried a pulse of their own. When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt heavier. Margaret was polishing the silverware for the meeting, her hands moving with a precision that came from years of trying to maintain order in a house that no longer had any. She paused when she saw me. "Be ready," she whispered. "Everyone shows their true face during a will reading, is Weld." I nodded, though my stomach was tight. I'd never been part of anything like this, not in Phoenix, not in the simple life I led fixing engines and patching drywall. But now I could feel something gathering in the walls of this house, like a storm rolling in without thunder. By mid-morning, the extended family had arrived. They poured in through the front doors in clusters: cousins, nephews, distant relatives, who had never once appeared during Arun's bad health, but now seemed eager to appear impeccable and grieving. Their eyes wandered across the room, landing on me, narrowing slightly, as if they already suspected I was the wrong piece in their puzzle. I stood at the edge of the living room, hands folded, feeling the weight of their judgment. It reminded me of how Evan's colleagues used to look at me polite on the surface, assessing underneath. A man from another world, a man who didn't belong. Arun entered last, supported by both Sudha and Nurse Molly. He looked tired, not weak, exactly, but worn, like a page that had been turned too many times. He gave me a small nod, the kind that said he expected me to stand steady. The room settled. Conversations died. Sudha placed a leather folder on the coffee table with the care of someone placing evidence in a courtroom. "We are here," she began, "to review the final wishes of Mr. Arun Varma. All legal procedures have been followed, and all mental competency evaluations have been completed by certified professionals." Her voice was calm, controlled. She'd done this many times, I could tell. But today, she wasn't just an attorney, she was a shield. Niran, seated across from me, leaned back with his arms crossed, an expression of smug expectation on his face. He thought he knew what was coming. He didn't. Sudha opened the folder. In his will, Mr. Varma designates the majority of his estate, approximately 87%, to establish the Arun Art Foundation, supporting youth programs, artist residencies, and community initiatives in honor of his late son. Who? A stunned silence hit the room, then a crack of disbelief. "What? Gang, he's giving it to strangers?" They dead-eyed. "This must be a mistake." Sudha raised a hand. "These are his signed intentions." As we're gone, Niran stood abruptly. "His son is dead. Why honor a memory by giving everything away to outsiders when the family—" "This is his family," Sudha cut in, sharp as glass. "The one he chose to honor." "Work instead." Her tone silenced him. She continued. "To the household staff, Margaret, Molly, and several others, he leaves substantial retirement funds, fully secured, as gratitude for their years of service." "Right?" Margaret covered her mouth, tears forming instantly. She hadn't expected that. She had worked here for decades, but never once asked for anything. It showed in her shaking hands. Then, Sudha read the next clause. "For the main residence, the Chiang Mai home, the bequest is awarded to Henry Lawson." I go. My name dropped into the room like a stone. Voices erupted instantly. "What? 18. He barely knows him. That's way. Actions and everyone days. This is fraud. And he manipulated him. If 27. But Sudha was prepared. She lifted a separate file, thicker, sealed with hospital stamps. Mr. Varma obtained 3 independent capacity evaluations to ensure that no challenge of incompetence or undue influence would stand. He passed all assessments. W. Her eyes locked on to Niran. All of them. Die Kram. Niran's face drained of color. Then it hardened into something spiteful. This is ridiculous, he hissed. You all saw it. This man shows up out of nowhere. And suddenly he gets the house? He's after the property. I've seen people like him. People like me. I stepped forward. People who were abandoned and happened to be in the wrong place at the right time? That'ers. He glared at me. I didn't blink. And that was when Sudha delivered the first twist. The one that cracked the room open. There is more, she said. Mr. Varma wanted full transparency. If yours know. She pulled out a USB drive, the same one Molly had given me days earlier, and connected it to the television. A grainy video filled the screen. Footage of Niran sneaking into Arun's office, opening the safe, photographing documents, taking cash, returning the items with false precision. Gasps rippled across the room. Niran lunged toward the screen. That's not real. That's edited. Die please. The security system is authenticated and time-stamped by the installation company, Sudha said. This footage is legitimate. His hands curled into fists. But the room had already turned against him. And then the second twist. Sudha opened another envelope. This is the DNA report Mr. Varma requested last year, when you claimed to be his closest blood relative. It's Kumo. Arlie read. She held it up. You are not related. The room exploded. Voices shouting. Accusations flying. Furniture scraping. The kind of chaos only money can create. But in the middle of that storm, Arun raised his hand slowly, but with authority. Enough. Docus. And the room froze. His voice was soft, but undeniable. For years, he said, I watched people claim to love me only when my signature mattered. When the fortune mattered. When the house mattered. But Henry. He turned to me. Henry saw me. Not my money. Had a few no 10. I felt heat behind my eyes. Not tears. Something deeper. A recognition. He continued. Henry came into my life when I least expected it. Not for gain, not for comfort, but because he was alone. And I was alone. And sometimes life puts 2 broken edges together to make a straight line. Together. Then, as if those words cost him what little strength he had, his legs buckled. I rushed forward and caught him before he hit the floor. Arun. Stay with me. His breathing fluttered. His eyes closed. Molly screamed for the doctor. People backed away. Even Niran stumbled as if the ground had tilted. I lowered Arun gently onto the carpet and held his hand as the medical team pushed through the crowd. His grip tightened weakly around my fingers. Son, he whispered. I felt something in me crack open, something old, something wounded, something hollow. I'm here, I murmured. I'm right here. Axe. His eyes flickered once more, as if he was trying to memorize my face. And the room dissolved into frantic motion as they lifted him onto a stretcher and rushed him away. The last thing I remember before the doors slammed shut was Niran shouting, "This isn't over," with Clafted Day. And he was right. It wasn't. Not by a long shot. Arun didn't die that day. But something inside him dimmed. The doctors kept him overnight for monitoring. And when they wheeled him back into the house the next morning, he looked smaller, as if the confrontation had taken a piece of him that wouldn't return. I stayed by his side. Not because anyone asked me to, but because leaving him alone felt wrong, like walking away from a man who had seen me when the world turned its back. He slept for most of the morning, and in that quiet, Sudha approached me. She didn't speak right away. She simply handed me the envelope Arun had prepared, the one she had stopped me from opening earlier. Now, she said softly. He wanted you to have this now. End quote. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in the shaky script of a man who had fought time and refused to surrender until he found the right words. Henry, if you are reading this, it means I had less strength than I hoped. You came into my life by accident, but you stayed by choice. That is something my own blood never understood. Whatever they say, know this. I did not give you my home. I entrusted it to you. And if my final act means they hate you more than they ever cared for me, let them. Use the house for good. Use it to give others a place to breathe. Let my walls protect the people who, like us, were left behind by those they trusted. We cannot change our sons, but we can change what we leave behind. Arun. I pressed the paper to my chest. I hadn't cried when Evan left me. I hadn't cried when I slept on a bench, wondering whether I'd survive the night. But reading that letter, something deep in me loosened. Like a knot I'd been carrying for years, finally came undone. By noon, the house filled again, this time not with greedy relatives, but with investigators. Sudha had called authorities to report the financial exploitation caught on camera. They spoke with staff, collected the USB, photographed the safe, catalogued documents. Niran wasn't present. He'd fled just after Arun collapsed, but in leaving so quickly, he'd abandoned something vital: leverage. Lies require stamina. And he'd run out of breath. Later that afternoon, the police located him in a rented apartment across town and took him in for questioning. Elder abuse isn't taken lightly here. When the officers informed Arun, he nodded, without gloating, without triumph, just relief. It was time, he whispered. 2 days later, Arun slipped away in his sleep. Peacefully, quietly. No shouting, no accusations. The house seemed to exhale, its tension releasing into the wooden beams. I was the one sitting beside him when his breathing faded. I held his hand and whispered, "Thank you for everything," though I wasn't sure if he heard. Maybe he didn't need to. Some goodbyes are meant more for the living than the dead. The funeral was small the way he would have wanted. Margaret cried openly. Molly placed a single white flower on the table beside his portrait. Sudha read a short eulogy, steady but warm, and I realized she wasn't just his attorney, she had been his friend for years. People like her see the truth of a person long before anyone else is willing to. A man from the Youth Arts Center spoke briefly about the foundation being established in Arun's memory. Then the room fell quiet, as if everyone was waiting for someone to fill the silence. I stood. I didn't prepare words. I didn't need to. He saved me, I said simply. And I hope I saved him a little too. 8. After the service, Sudha approached me with a folder of official documents, probate forms, transfer agreements, legal summaries. She explained everything slowly, making sure I understood. The house was mine. The responsibilities too. "You're allowed to decline," she said. I shook my head. "I won't." As one. In the following months, the investigation against Niran deepened. The footage was damning. The forged signatures, obvious. The financial discrepancies, irrefutable. He pleaded for leniency. But the court was unmoved. Exploiting an elderly relative carries weight. He lost his access to Arun's estate completely. Exactly as Arun had feared, and exactly as he had prepared for. Justice, in the quiet way it often arrives, found its place. Life shifted for me after that. The house felt too large at first, its hallways still echoing with the chaos of that last family meeting. I moved through it slowly, touching banisters, opening windows, learning the rhythm of a place built by a man who kept both beauty and sorrow in equal measure. Sometimes I spoke to him out loud, telling him about the small repairs I'd done. The way I used to narrate my work back in the shop. It made the rooms feel less empty. And eventually, I understood what he wanted. A second chance isn't something you receive, it's something you pass on. The first person who stayed in the guest room was a young man from Calgary going through a difficult divorce. The next was a nurse who needed a month to recover from burnout. Then a retired teacher estranged from her family. Every time I opened that door, I felt something warm settle in my chest. A piece of Arun's legacy continuing through me. And then, one day, Evan showed up. He stood at the gate holding his son, my grandson, a little boy, with the kind of open curiosity that hurts, because it reminds you how children see you before the world teaches them otherwise. "I heard what you did for that man," Evan said quietly. And I want to try again. If you'll let me. Take in heaven. We weren't healed in a day. You don't stitch years of disappointment with a single apology. But we began. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. He visited every week. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with his wife. Sometimes with my grandson, who loved the koi pond out back and always asked for grilled cheese sandwiches the way I used to make for Evan. It didn't erase the past, but it made the future something other than a closed door. Tonight, as I sit in the garden Arun once tended, fireflies floating like lost stars, I think about how strange life is, how betrayal led me here, how an act of cruelty by my own son brought me to a man who showed me more kindness in 6 days than some people show in years. And this house, this beautiful, impossible house, is no longer a reminder of what I lost. It's a reminder of what I chose to build next. People think justice always arrives loudly. Sometimes it arrives in whispers. Sometimes it arrives in a courtroom. And sometimes it arrives in the shape of a stranger who becomes family. Tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story and tell me from which city you're listening tonight.